Have you ever wondered why in Formula One, a maneuver that is clearly illegal in everyone's eyes can end up not being sanctioned by the FIA? Today, we are going to reveal what really happened in Abu Dhabi between Lando Norris and Yuki Tsunoda. Because what seemed like a case of double standards now has an explanation, and an unexpected twist that very few know about. It all started in a race situation that seemed like just one of many. Lap 23 of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was neither the chaotic start nor the decisive end. It was simply the midpoint of a career that until then kept tensions within a reasonable range. But in that moment, everything changed. Lando Norris, in one of the most competitive McLarens of the entire season, was trapped behind the RB of Yuki Tsunoda, a driver who, although he was not directly fighting for the championship, did play a crucial role, containing, wearing down, slowing down the advance of one of the cars with the best race pace. The maneuver was millimetric, but its consequences reverberated throughout the paddock. On the long back straight of the Yas Marina circuit, Norris activated DRS. The speed was noticeably higher, the McLaren had the traction, the space, the momentum. But Tsunoda, far from surrendering, adopted an aggressive defense, cutting the inside line, then moving to the outside again in a move that, at first glance, looked like little more than a firm defense. What followed was a kind of choreography at 300 km/h. Norris, seeing that there was no space and that the maneuver could end in a crash, decided to open completely. His car crossed the track limits. He left with all four wheels beyond the white lines. And he completed the overtaking. To the cameras, to the commentators, to millions of fans, that was very clear. Norris had overtaken off the track. And in Formula One, that is usually synonymous with an automatic penalty. The sport's regulations have been clear for years in this regard. Gaining a position outside the circuit is illegal unless you return the position immediately. But Norris didn't do it. He didn't get up. He didn't release the position. And the most shocking thing, the FIA, the stewards, did not sanction him either. At that time, what was a risky overtake became an international scandal within the paddock. Because it wasn't just a matter of points. It wasn't just another position on the table. It was what it represented, an alleged inconsistency in the judges' criteria. For many, what Norris was allowed was something that, in any other context, would have meant a clear and indisputable penalty. Why not now? That overtake allowed Norris to climb the race and alter the strategic flow of the entire top six. McLaren was able to play his cards with clean air, while Tsunoda fell in pace and morale. A mixture of fury and confusion was unleashed in the Racing Bull's box. Because although they understood that their driver had been aggressive, they could not conceive how the other could leave the circuit, overtake and get away with it. Social media exploded. Analysts, former drivers, fans, all with divided opinions. Some pointed out that Norris should return the position or take a subsequent sanction. Others defended the maneuver as a natural reaction to a dangerous blockade. But the truth is that the final decision was not known immediately, and that only fueled the controversy. 4 hours, even after the race was over, fans could not understand why what, until that day, was an unbreakable rule, was not enforced. This is how the scandal began. One that not only called into question a specific action, but touched the foundations of the FIA's judgment. The question was simple but explosive. Was there favoritism? Or was there an ulterior motive that justified what in everyone's eyes was unjustifiable? The answer would come later, but by that time, the media damage had already been done. And beyond the result on the track, what was broken at that moment was something much more difficult to recover. Confidence in the coherence of the decisions. When the FIA finally published its official verdict on the incident between Norris and Tsunoda, the contents of the document caused even more of a stir than the incident itself. Because it was not a simple subjective interpretation. What the Federation revealed was a chain of technical and legal analysis that not only justified the lack of sanction for Norris, but also set a completely different precedent for this type of maneuver. For the first time in a long time, the FIA was not limited to the literality of the regulations, but applied a little-known, almost never-used clause: force majeure. The concept of force majeure in the International Sports Code is extremely delicate. It is intended for situations where a pilot is forced to break a rule as a direct consequence of an external and unavoidable action. Not by own mistake, not because of excess ambition, but for having been literally forced into that infraction to avoid a greater evil. In this case, a high-speed collision. To justify that decision, the commissioners presented a set of evidence that, although not visible in real time to the average viewer, was irrefutable from a technical point of view. First, the frame-by-frame video. From the aerial shot, it could be clearly seen that Tsunoda executed a double move in the braking zone. He initially moved towards the inside of the layout to cover the position, which is allowed. But when Norris was already in full braking maneuver, Tsunoda moved again, this time towards the outside line. That second change, reactive and in a critical zone, is a clear violation of the regulations. But the definitive proof was not visual. It was telemetry. The FIA analyzed the data from the steering wheel and sensors of Tsunoda's car, and what they found was conclusive. In less than 2 seconds, the Japanese driver applied 2 steering corrections while braking, one with a greater angle than the other. That is, it was not a slight correction. It was a late defense that crossed the line between legal and dangerous. For its part, the McLaren's telemetry showed another uncomfortable truth. Norris didn't just go off the track. He did this while applying as much braking as possible without locking, and with an extreme outward steering angle. There was no intention to cut back. There was no acceleration during the passage outside. The entire control system showed that it was a pure evasive maneuver, designed to avoid imminent contact. At that moment, the interpretation of the maneuver changed completely. It was no longer an illegal overtaking. It was a shock evasion. And that, according to the FIA, not only exonerates Norris, but reinforces the idea that any advantage obtained was a direct consequence of a previous infraction committed by the rival. But the analysis did not stop there. The FIA also reviewed the distance between the cars at the time of the maneuver. And another key piece of information emerged. If Norris had tried to brake even harder to avoid going off the track, the deceleration would have caused Tsunoda to close him completely, leaving him with no escape route. In that context, there was no safer alternative than to leave. And it was precisely that inevitability that activated the force majeure clause. This type of interpretation is not common in the FIA. In fact, many experts claim that this is the first time in years that the agency has made a decision based on such a detailed and multidisciplinary contextual analysis. Video, telemetry, track position, distance, trajectory, and collision risk. Each of these elements was integrated as part of the ruling. And in the end, the result was as unexpected as it was controversial. Norris would not be sanctioned. This decision, of course, was not without criticism. Some teams even raised formal inquiries to understand whether this new approach would become the norm or if it was a one-time exception. The FIA responded that this was not a policy change, but rather a specific application of the regulations based on an exceptional case. But in practice, what this resolution made clear is that the context can and should modify the way the regulation is interpreted. Ultimately, what happened in Abu Dhabi was more than a maneuver between two pilots. It was a clash between two philosophies of how to apply sports justice. And this time, as surprising as it may seem, the most complex one. The one that is not seen. The one that doesn't fit in a tweet. The one that is based on data, evidence, and the real danger that drivers face when they compete at the limit at the pinnacle of motorsport. The penalty for Yuki Tsunoda was not simply an indirect consequence of Norris overtaking. According to the FIA, it was due to a set of actions that, when analyzed cold, constituted one of the clearest and most penalizable defensive errors of the entire season. And most importantly, it was not a single miscalculated move, but a sequence of decisions made in just a couple of seconds, decisions that transformed a legitimate defense into a serious infraction. The central point of the incident, and the reason why Tsunoda ended up being penalized, lies in the nature of the double change of direction in the braking zone. The regulations are very explicit about this. The pilot defending position can choose a single line to cover. He can move once to close the interior or to force the opponent to take a different route. But what it cannot do is react, correct, or close again when the attacker is already engaged in braking. These types of movements, executed at such extreme speeds, are considered dangerous because they generate an element of uncertainty that can lead to a serious accident. The FIA emphasized that these types of movements not only prevent the attacker from completing a legitimate maneuver, but also take away any physical space to react. In other words, Tsunoda didn't just defend. He blocked an escape route. He closed a door that, at the time, was necessary to prevent a high-speed accident. The FIA's decision in Abu Dhabi opened a door that, depending on how it is managed from now on, can become a structural precedent for the future of Formula One, or be archived as a simple exception without continuity. And that is where its real importance lies. Because beyond the incident between Norris and Tsunoda, what is at stake is the way in which controversial maneuvers on the track under extreme pressure will be judged from now on. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.